Good morning. I am Francesca Taylor, Program Development Manager with the Miami-Dade Transportation Planning Organization. Thank you all for attending this year's Transportation Alternatives virtual workshop. We're excited to see what applications you may submit this year. So a few guidelines as we get started. The workshop is being held virtually and is being recorded. So I want to let you all know, make you all aware. We ask that all attendees, again, remain on mute throughout the duration of the workshop. If you wish to provide a comment, please raise your hand. And once you are acknowledged, then you can unmute and ask that you introduce yourself.
Last night for transportation meeting.
So maybe you should have Jose or Doug attend, not you.
Let me see if Doug wants to be part of it. I want to hear what they have to say. Let me.
Okay, well, I'll let you.
You know what? Let me forward this to Doug. That's a good idea. Let me forward this to Jose.
You need to go until the meeting that you can't, and you probably.
All right, there we go. Again, I'm muting all of our participants for now, and once we get to the question and answer portion, we can answer any questions that you may have. So again, once we get to that portion, we'll ask that you use the raise your hand button, and then we'll acknowledge you so that you can introduce yourself and state your question. So moving into today's workshop agenda, we'll start with welcome and introductions. We'll give an overview of the Transportation Alternatives Program. I'll talk a little bit about the Transportation Alternatives process for the Miami-Dade TPO. Then I'll hand it over to my colleagues at FDOT to discuss the LAP requirements and this year's submittal process, which is exclusively through the grant application process, which is online. Then we'll have questions and answers, and we'll adjourn. So as mentioned, hello everyone again. I'm Francesca Taylor, Program Development Manager, Miami-Dade Transportation, Miami-Dade TPO. And I will yield the floor to my other colleagues out here that may be attending with us. Let's see. Excuse me.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Xiomara Nunez. I'm with FDOT. I'm the District Local Program Administrator.
Do we have other members from the TPO and FDOT who would like to introduce themselves?
Okay, Kevin Walford from the Miami-Dade TPO, Transportation Planner.
Good morning, Oscar Camino, Transportation Planner, Miami-Dade TPO.
Good morning, Josie Bermudez, Planner 2, Miami-Dade TPO.
Alina Brito from the FDOT.
Good morning, Janine Gaslon, the Miami-Dade TPO.
Okay. I think that covers everyone. Thank you all. Okay, so for a quick overview of the Transportation Alternatives Program, every year we are notified of the Transportation Alternatives Program. It's a program that's actually been around for some time. It was extended through the FAST Act in 2015 to include even more projects. Essentially, the Transportation Alternatives Program allows for funding of non-motorized projects, but it also includes things like safe routes to school, and it also folds in the recreational trails program and includes environmental mitigation. So just giving you a brief overview there, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the eligible projects in just a moment. So the process for the Miami-Dade TPO's Transportation Alternatives Program starts with our schedule. So we submitted, we received the call for applications from the state on Wednesday and opened that up to all our local municipalities and other eligible entities. Today we're holding our workshop scheduled from 10 a.m. to noon. Applications this year are due Friday, February 18th by 5 p.m. There are no late submittals. As mentioned, the applications will be submitted through the FDOT GAAP process, or GAAP online grant application program. And that program does a hard cutoff at 5 p.m. So I want to make everyone aware of that. Next on our schedule, we'll have agency project presentations. Those are tentatively scheduled for March 31st and April 1st of this year. Again, subject to change and likely to be held virtually as was last year. So eligible projects. Eligible projects include on-road and off-road trail facilities for bikes and pedestrians, construction, planning, and design of infrastructure-related items that will provide safe routes to school for non-drivers. This includes safe routes to school, or safe routes for non-drivers. This includes the elderly and school-aged children. Rails to trails conversion, construction of turnouts and viewing areas, community improvement activities. This can include billboard signage and things of that nature. Environmental mitigation, so storm water drainage, those activities are eligible. Also safe routes to school, both infrastructure and non-infrastructure projects, as well as the expenses related to the Safe Routes to School coordinator. That is also eligible under the TAP program. Also, we have planning, design, and construction of boulevards, and those are typically those that are associated with former state road systems. So if you're thinking about road diets and those type of conversions, those are eligible items. And then lastly, the recreational trails program, which was previously its own program a few years back, but was rolled into the Transportation Alternatives program. So on this slide, we just have a quick example of a prior submittal. So this was actually submitted last year, the Ludlam Trail through Miami-Dade County Parks and Recreation Pros. So as you can see, this submittal is a pedestrian bridge over the West Flagler Street. So you can see the overpass with the iconic signage. So just showing one of the eligible projects. I believe the Ludlam Trail actually qualified for $1 million for funding, and was rightly awarded. So let's talk about some general criteria for selection. No more than $1 million of TA funds can be awarded to a single project. And also, if you do have a project that is exceeding that $1 million in cost, you must demonstrate that the additional funds, there are sources for those additional funds, that additional carryover past the 1 million. No more than 3 applications per department can be submitted, and we request that agencies rank for themselves their priorities if they were to submit more than 3 applications. So indicate your priorities 1, 2, and 3. Next, each application package should consist of the items as you can see on the screen. My colleagues at FDOT will go through a little bit more detail on this. Of course, you need to have your completed application, attachments as applicable, letters of support, and previous records of any previous funding, especially, of course, if you have a project that's more than $1 million, we want to see your other funding sources. Lastly, we also must identify in your application package your right-of-way needs, including any easements, any cultural and environmental resource analysis. We want to have an understanding of the local area surrounding it, and then any permitting requirements. This time, I'm going to toss over our presentation to our colleagues at FDOT so that we can talk through the application. Do I have Alina or Zumara on the line?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I'll be taking care of this portion of the presentation. So What I'm actually going to do is do a screen takeover and share my screen. So just give me a minute to go ahead and get that done.
Sure.
And actually, before I do, just so everyone's aware, I'm going to share a link on the Teams meeting. This link will take you to the department's sort of like a handbook, if you will, guidance on the program and the procedure. So I'm going to go ahead and share that link in the chat box. And this has information on the program, eligibility, type of projects that can be done as examples, and just general information on the program. So you'll see that coming in the chat. So that should be appearing for you now. And right. So the first document that I'm going to be sharing with you all is the selection and prioritization criteria. I know that Francesca went through some of this, but I just want to touch base on a few important items. I want to make sure everybody's catching right early on. So as she said, she mentioned the application is definitely due Friday, February 18th at 5 p.m. And like she said, the deadline will cut off at 5, and the system will not allow submittals after 5 o'clock. And there's no extensions to that. The next thing that I want to direct your attention to, and actually before that, is the presentations. Everyone's required to present their applications to the department. They're tentatively scheduled for March 31st and April 1st. As we get closer to the date, we'll be reaching out and coordinating with the applicants on the presentations and location. We're not sure yet if it's going to be in person or virtual. I see somebody's asking what is the link. The link should be taking you to, let's see, should be taking you to this document. So if it's not doing that, let me know in the chat and I'll try to resend it. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you here on this in this document is the general criteria for selection. So I want to make sure everyone's aware that for your applications, no more than $1 million of TA funds are going to be awarded to any single project in any single application cycle, and no more than $1 million will apply to any phase to any single project, right? The next thing is that no more than 3 applications can be submitted per department. Then we're talking about the size of the package, right? The application in its entirety cannot exceed 15 pages. Attachments, exhibits, typical sections, anything that you include as supporting documentation cannot exceed 20 pages. So in total, your package should not exceed 35 pages. All right, so that is this document. Oh, one final thing, it's not in this document, but I want to make sure everyone is aware. If you are awarded a project, then you're going to be required to enter into a LAP agreement with the department, and you need to make sure you're meeting the federal requirements. That includes coordination throughout the design process and construction process. The department will be auditing projects as needed throughout the life of the project. And during design, there will need to be coordinated reviews. So if you have a project that's complete and you feel the design is 100%, it really isn't if it's awarded funds, because we need to make sure that our offices are reviewing the project and making sure that it is compliant with federal requirements. All right, so with that said, I'm going to jump into the application slide. So this is what Francesca had on her PowerPoint, and I'm just going to briefly go through the slides. All right, so this is the general application. This year we converted to a statewide application. So this application is the same in every district. Every district might have additional attachments. We definitely do, and I'll get to those later on in this presentation. So with this package, what I want to point out is that when we get to the section of project location and project limits, it's important that as you're identifying where the project is, you're identifying if it's on or off system, the roadway number that, is applicable. And then if you have, because we have seen on occasion projects that are located in various locations, We do need to see a separate attachment that has every single location listed and a map to show the locations. The other thing I want to point out in this document, and if it's too small because I have a very big screen, please let me know. I can definitely make it bigger. Not seeing any complaints, so I'll keep going. All right, so the second thing I want to point out in this section is public involvement. It's very important that the public's aware of the projects you're proposing and that they're in support of your project. I've seen projects that have been impacted severely because of the community not being involved early on. And I've seen projects that have even been removed after the fact because of that. As we go through further in the application, the next thing I want to point out is when we're talking about right-of-way. I want to make sure that you are aware of the right-of-way availability and ownership. Is the project within your right-of-way? If not, within whose right-of-way? And will you have the ability to do the project in, in the year committed, right? We did get a proposal in the past where the right-of-way was incorrectly listed as being publicly owned. It was in fact privately owned and was a project that we could not fund. So very important to make sure that you're being accurate with that. The last thing that I'm going to call attention to here is the project cost and estimate and funding request, because we did see a couple of errors in the last cycle. You want to make sure that this page, this sheet, this table matches what you're including in the project funding attachment. If you're saying you're requesting $1 million here, the funding sheet should say that you're requesting $1 million as well. If the local funds is, 500,000, then it should also say it in the other sheet as well. For the purposes of this application, local funds means every funding source that you have that is not the request that you're making to the department. So if you have a culmination of funds that you've gotten from your agency, other agencies that want to be involved, etc., that should be included under local funds. If you want to specify later what that is, that's fine. But from the department's perspective, local funds is all the funds that are being put together that are not coming from the department. So that's the application section. I'm going to jump now into the attachments. So the first one is the project implementation. So here we're asking for information on your design plans and permitting. So complete this, upload this to GAAP. The next attachment is going to be your project schedule. Be as detailed as possible. Make sure you're incorporating information from your agency, right? Your processes, the durations that it takes. And keep in mind too that the department has to be part of your review process. So you want to make sure you're incorporating the time that it takes for the department's reviews. Chapter 19 of the lab manual is an excellent resource. If you guys aren't familiar with the lab manual, I can include a link to the manual in the Teams chat. Just someone make a comment and I'll add it in there. You want to be looking at all these items that are listed here, your acquisition and award period for both consultant and contractor, depending on what you're asking for. Okay, I'll go ahead and do that once I finish with this. The actual schedule for the project itself, any production dates, your plans, our reviews, etc. So that would be your schedule. And again, be as detailed as possible. The next one is environmental evaluation. So this is practically coming from our type 1 checklist. This is what our environment section looks at when they're deciding or when they're reviewing for environmental certification. And so it's important that you go through each of these questions and really take a hard look at your project and whether or not any of these impacts are being caused by your project. It'll help you with your estimate, it'll help you with your project scheduling, and overall make for a more successful project. So, you guys can read through those items on your own, and we're here. If you guys have questions, you can always reach out. The next item is project funding, which I was referring to earlier. And the application obviously has the section that I showed you for project funding. And so where the bottom lines are in your application should align with what's listed here. What I want to call attention to on this sheet is this note. So the percentage of local contribution indicated in the above is going to be greater than or equal to the local contribution of the final contract award. So what does that mean? Here's an example. Let's say you say there's a 20% local contribution for construction project, and we award $1 million. And your bid amount actually comes back at $1 million. Then the awarded amount would be reduced to $800,000, and the local contribution would be $200,000, because based on your percentages, you said you were going to participate 20%. In another situation, same contribution, say you're saying 20% contribution, and again, we give you $1 million, but the bid amount is $1.4 million. So the awarded amount is going to stay at $1 million, but your contribution would increase to $400,000. That's why it's going to be greater than or equal to. The local contribution will be greater than or equal to. So this is project funding. The next attachment is going to be your local agency budget office commitment letter. And this one is just basically asking for you to include an attachment that shows commitment from your budget office and upload that to us, that you're going to be committing the funds to this project, and we know that your project is going to be funded in the year you're asking for the funds. And then the last attachment is the project sponsor certification. That's the project sponsor signing that they're going to be doing the project, that their costs are reasonable, that they're going to be providing any required match, that they're going to enter into the agreement with the department, etc. So after this, what I'm going to do is just quickly show you GAAP. And so my view is going to be different than yours. I have a department access. So what you're going to look for in your access once you're in GAAP, and there's instructions on how to access or how to gain access to GAAP in the selection criteria. So in this website, what you're going to look for is the new grant opportunities, and you're going to find the 2022 Transportation Alternative TA set aside. Hold on, I think I need to re-log on.
You have to select an organization.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that, Alina. So yeah, that's
Sure.
very important. And it's actually great that it happened to me right now, because you're not going to be able to go in without selecting your organization. So select your organization. I'm going to go into District 6 so I don't confuse anybody else. So you're going to find the 2022 Transportation Alternative set aside, and you're going to select apply. When you're in here, you're going to see the application. So at the top, you can type in 2022 and the name of your project. And here you can download again the selection and prioritization criteria, the application, and all the attachments that I just went through with you. If you'll notice here on the left, there's a gray shaded out check mark. Every document that has this icon next to it must be uploaded. And until you upload all of those documents, you're not going to see a submittal button at the bottom of the screen. You can download it, fill it out, re-upload it. In the bottom here, you include the budget information. If you need to include additional documents that are not the ones referenced above, you can upload them here. And then you'll get an icon for a submittal once these items at minimum have been uploaded. You can go back to your application afterwards. You don't have to complete it all in one sitting. So you'll be able to, once you've selected apply, go back and see your application listed. And so with that said, I believe that's it for me, Francesca. So I'm going to turn back over to you, and I think we're going to take questions.
Yes, thank you. And I do want to follow up. Any items that were shared in our link, we will provide a follow-up email so that everyone has access to that information.
And I'm going to be putting in the link for the lab manual right now into the chat box. So you'll see that come in the next 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Alina. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with one comment regarding GAAP. Once you upload or you attach your documents into the section, not until you put the project funding and fill in that project funding will you see a submit button. Once you have everything uploaded and you filled in that the funding amounts, then you will be able to access the submit button. I just want to make sure you're aware of that because a lot of people get a hiccup on that.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Do we have any questions out there? I don't see any hands raised at the moment. One item I did want to share earlier is that as of last year, we received 23 eligible applications, and 8 of those were funded to the tune of $6.58 million. The year prior, we had 10 applications that were funded at $7.5 million. So just giving you a historical trend of how many applications we receive and the total amount that is awarded. Okay, I think I do see some hands up now. All right, I see a Delroy Peters.
Yeah, Delroy Peters, North Bay Village, the Capital Improvement Project Manager. I do have a couple of questions, Francesca, and I think I really do like the session, and it's very informative so far. I appreciate it. Now, my first question is in reference to the general criteria for selection. You mentioned, well, actually it says no more than 3 applications per department can be submitted. Can you clarify, are you talking about the department as an FDOT? Are you talking about the local agencies who can submit no more than 3? Can you clarify that, please?
Sure.
So I can take that. So basically what we mean is the agencies are generally divided into departments. So for each department within your agency, you can submit 3 applications. Say you have a public works and a parks department. Public works can submit 3 and parks can submit 3.
Okay, good. Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. My next question is, Zamora, you mentioned the environmental evaluation sheet, which is very good to see. But then the question that came to mind is, how can we avoid unforeseen increases based on reviews? Because I find that when we're doing reviews, based on FDOT comments, sometimes we have to go back and we have to do more studies and it increases the project cost. And these are unforeseen, we may not have budgeted for it. So when I saw the environmental evaluation, I said, wow, if I had seen that sheet, we probably would have been able to predict and perhaps get a better estimate of our project. So I'm just kind of wondering how we can avoid these excess costs that sometimes come based on review comments.
So it's going to go back to what you just said. You know, some people, when they see this sheet, they just say no and submit and move on. So it really is a matter of taking that sheet and looking through it and taking it to heart. And that's why we ask as many questions as we do. We want to make sure that you're looking at your project from all the angles beforehand, right? When you're scoping, you're properly scoping it out to every extent. What kind of permits are you going to need? You know, what kind of environmental impacts might be involved with this, right? So looking through that sheet is going to help you foresee, right, whether or not you're going to be needing to do any kind of surveying during your project, right? And incorporating that into your application. Because say, for example, you're looking at your project and you're not thinking about the environmental, you might not realize that within the footprint of your project, you have properties that are 50 years or older, and come time for the project, you're going to have to provide to us a cultural resource assessment survey. And so that's an expense that just by taking a look at the project and, you know, reviewing the items that we have in the application, it will trigger you to think about that. But those are all things that should be scoped out in general at the front end of your project when you're thinking about all of the things that could apply to a project, right? So I want to point to our LAP manual as an excellent resource for just information in general. Chapter 19 talks about design. Chapter 20 is specific to the plan specs and estimates. Chapter 23 talks about construction administration. And then Chapter 18 talks about your professional services procurement. If you guys have questions, you're welcome to reach out to us and ask. I know that, you know, the different offices in our department are always willing to help. But it really is a matter of properly scoping out the project in the front end and making sure that you're considering all aspects of it as part of your application.
Great. My final question, thank you so much, Maura. My final question has to do with the right-of-way. Now, do you fund right-of-way that are only publicly owned, or can they be privately owned? Right-of-way projects and right-of-way.
Historically, we have not funded right-of-way or PD&E. Local governments are not certified to do PD&E or right-of-way, and that would require further discussions with department management if that would be a request that an agency is considering.
Okay.
And just keep in mind that anything that is acquired has to be done in accordance with the Uniform Relocation Act.
Okay. Appreciate it.
So we had a few comments that came into the chat. One comment was regarding what year of funding what year would the projects receive funding, and those would be eligible for our 5th year in our list of priority projects. So we're looking at fiscal year 2027. Another question was asking about the total allocation. At this time, I don't have the information, and I can do some further research with my colleagues at FDOT on our total allocation for our district. However, historically, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me clarify something. So what we're looking at is the new 5th year of our work program. So that's actually fiscal year 2028. Last cycle we ran for 2027. As far as allocations, we don't currently have allocations yet. We can only provide an estimate at this time. It's always subject to change. We don't get our allocations until much later, and actually until next fiscal year, I want to say. But right now I can tell you our estimate based on last year's allocations is about 5.5 million. So we're, like I said, looking at the new 5th year. Sometimes we have opportunity in our work program to fund a program in an earlier year, and that's going to be as we're, you know, going through our work program development cycle, that we can come to those determinations. So based on the information that you provide in your application, we might reach out and confirm that you're going to be available to do or ready to do the project in an earlier year before we actually go ahead and program in an earlier year.
Okay, thank you for that. We actually have another question that came through the chat. Can the project include contingency?
So the department does not fund contingency. You can include contingency, but that has to be a local funded item.
Do we have any other questions out there? This has been great discussion so far. Thank you all for participating. We look forward to seeing your projects. Again, we will send out a follow-up email for any items that were shared in the chat box so that everyone can see that information. Again, we are recording today, so we'll make the recording available as well. And I believe I saw another hand. Claudia Hasbin.
Hi, good morning all. If the agency is already lab certified, can you explain if we're going to have to recertify it, or what kind of documentation is allowed to be submitted as a proof of certification? Can you go a little deeper in the lab process for that, please?
Sure. So if you're lab certified, well, you know, we know, so don't worry about that part, but you do need to include it in your application and indicate who your responsible charge is. The certification, the way that it works though, is that if you're full certified, it's valid for 3 years. If you're project specific certified, you would have been told what projects you were certified to complete, and it's only valid for those projects and until that project is complete. So anything expanding beyond that is going to be requiring recertification. The second point I want to make is that even if you are currently certified, you have to keep in mind that by the time this project rolls around, you're going to need to be recertified, right? Because we're looking at fiscal year 2028. So the 3 years would have come and gone by then. So we don't need, if you are certified, we don't really need any documentation to be submitted to us because we have that. We just need you to indicate that you're certified in the year of the certification. And then, and I think actually we removed the requirement for indicating your responsible charge. But let me do a screen share so you can see the section that I'm referring to in your application. So screen share. So this is the actual application, the statewide application. And this is your first page at the bottom. It's asking for your certification status. So either you are lab certified and then you were certified, you're not certified, but you're going to seek certification. You're not certified, but you're asking the district to complete the project. You're not certified, but you've secured a sponsor. So you would indicate that there, and that's all you need to do. Any questions on that?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure. Vicky Gutanis.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation. It's excellent. My question is on the lab certification checklist you just showed. I work for SFRTA Tri-Rail, and typically when we get these grant awards, we flex them for FTA. So we do not administer them as lab. The funds are flexed to us and through the FTA. And there isn't a box for that on that form.
So these are FHWA funds. The flex is typically with FTA funds. I've never heard of TA money being flexed to a local agency, but I am not by any means the expert on the work program. So if you want, just contact me separately and we can talk further. Okay.
Well, that may be the case. I know we have flexed Broward MPO and Palm Beach TPO funds through their local initiatives and
but TA funds or SU funds?
Well, that's the question, because they run both projects together. They do TA and their local initiatives, and that may be the difference. Maybe I should give you a call, and
okay.
Would that be all right?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, my contact information is on, I think, the application and on the letter. It's definitely on the criteria, the selection criteria.
I do believe we were funded in last year's round for a project. And
through this district?
Yes, through District 6.
And it was definitely not TA funds.
No, it wasn't. It was Transit Corridor funds.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that question. So we also have a few questions that popped into the chat. Yes, we will send out the presentation today and of course any other materials. And another question is, if awards are made for FY 2027, actually 2028, what year is a construction funded project expected to start design?
Well, it depends really if what you're asking for, right? If you come to us with a request for construction in 2028, then we're expecting that you start design in fiscal year 2026, right? To allow time for any kind of coordination that needs to occur. If you're asking for design funds, then the design funds would be in 2028, and construction would be, would be at our assumption right now funded through the local government. And the expectation from Federal Highway is that construction begin no later than 10 years from the authorization date of design. So the federal authorization date happens before we enter into a LAP agreement for design. So that's your outer limit, I guess.
Thank you. Another question, describe an eligible drainage project.
Drainage is not eligible. Drainage can be consequential to a lap project, in which case the item may be eligible, but drainage as a project is not TA eligible.
Thanks for that clarification. Were there any other questions?
Vicki Katanis, one more question.
Sure.
Let's say you receive funding for a design project. Can you then, for $1 million, well, that's kind of, but let's say.
It's a big project, but okay.
Hypothetically.
Sure.
Can you then apply in the following year for construction funds for the same project?
Yes, you
Yes,
can. And
okay.
we have had that happen in the past. Just keep in mind that I wouldn't say the next year, right? Because we're looking at 2-year separation between design and construction, especially for a project that has $1 million of a design. That's a very big construction project, right? So I would say, you know, it would be skipping a year at minimum because we wouldn't be programming a year apart.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Again, just want to mention to everyone that applications are due through GAAP. We do have those instructions. We have provided those instructions to you via email. So want to ensure that you're able to access that, that application. I'm not seeing any other questions. Vicki, I do still see your hand. I'm not sure if you have another question.
No, sorry. I'll lower that. Thank you.
No worries. Great. And I see no other questions in the chat. Again, the meeting is recorded, so we'll share that recording. We'll share all of our items presented today, the presentation and other items that were shared in the chat. Thanks again for your participation. We look forward to your prompt submittals of applications February 18th by 5 p.m. Through the GAAP. If you have any questions in the meantime, our contact information is available on the application. And with that, thank you all for participating.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.